Hello everyone, this is your instructor Kuldeep in the class. Let's start with the very first module of MB500, which is talking about the overview and architecture. In this module, there are three lessons which we would be covering. First of all, we would be discussing the ecosystem of Dynamics 365 and what are the main components available in that. We would also be exploring the technical architecture of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. Along with that, we would be discussing some of our design and deployment considerations. What should be the design best practices and the deployment best practices when you're working up on any of your D365 migration or a fresh implementation. So let's start with the very first lesson, which is going to talk about the ecosystem and the main components on top of which Dynamics 365 product lines built. So let's talk about some of the applications down the line. So there are plenty of Dynamics 365 applications which exist into the Dynamics 365 product line or Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem down there. Previously, we used to categorize them in two different platforms altogether. One could be your CRM, which is customer focused, customer relationship management applications down there. Another one could have been our ERP, which is our enterprise resource planning down there. Now, talking about the current Dynamics 365 environment, I've got Dynamics 365 sales, customer service, D365 marketing. I've got my finance and operations, which have further broke down into D365 finance and D365 supply chain for operations down there. I've got my Dynamics 365 talent for talent onboarding, talent attract, and then pretty much processing the job applications, integrating that to our human resource systems down there. I've got my Power Platform, which can have the Power applications, the Power apps, pretty much talking about the Power Platform availability of our D365 architecture. Having said the same things, all these applications comes under Microsoft Dynamics 365, whether it's retail, finance and operations, project service automation, talent or field service, or any of those applications down the line. So the purpose of this slide is to explain you there are a number of D365 applications available, and primarily you can categorize them as a CRM app or recently branded as customer engagement applications, or it could be your operations, whether it's your Dynamics 365 finance or supply chain or project operations or retail or any other application down there. Let's move to the next segment over here. Since MB500 is for the technical audience, we are discussing the developer environment which is associated with Dynamics 365. So doesn't really matter with the evolution of AX 2012, R2 and R3, we started using a little bit of Visual Studio, but that was very limited in terms of SSRS reports development and all. But starting AX 7, further rebranded as Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, Visual Studio is the sole IDE that's my integrated development environment for all kind of finance and operations development needs. So developers will have their own instance of Visual Studio, and on top of that, we can implement our VSTS, Visual Studio Team Services, also known as Azure DevOps. So I can go for Azure DevOps to create my CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration and continuous deployment pipelines. I can have my build and release definitions as part of that. So majority of that, when we talk about the developer tools, that's what we have in here. Now, before we proceed further, let me take you to my hands-on lab system to understand some of the basic aspects of these development tools available down there. So I'm moving to my labs instance down there. I'm at mylabs.gtechlearn.com, provided you guys would be having your own lab access URL from where you can access these on-premises hosted D365 machines. So I'm keying in my user ID passwords down there, and let me click on login. The moment I do that, it is technically connecting to one of my on-prem machine which is hosted back in there, and I've got multiple tools listed. So let me show you something. If I go in there, let me quickly refresh. This is one of the one box development instance where I've got my finance and operations, I've got my Visual Studio, I've got my SQL Server. All these development tools are available at the same place. So you can pretty much have an integrated architecture to follow in terms of development best practices and how do we do that as far as the development is concerned. So in the meanwhile, it is refreshing. Quickly talk about that. If I'm on my Visual Studio down there, that's the first thing we were discussing down there. So let's understand a couple of key segments. One of that is if you move to view, there is something called as Application Explorer. Now, it's not that it's really new in D365. That was available in Dynamics AX 2012 as well, when we used to have the SSRS reports deployment right from there. But now, since every single thing have been shifted to Visual Studio, so the Application Explorer is the AOT representation, application object tree representation, on which we would be doing lots of things down there, whether this is related to some of our data types, the base enums, the extended data types, how do we work EDTs and how do we start utilizing them, whether it's related to our data models, whether it's tables, views, query, data entities, aggregate data entities, composite data entities, maps and all, or whether it's related to some of our code related classes, macros and all, user interfaces for forms. So we will be discussing this a lot during this particular program. That's the very first thing. Secondary, when we talk about that development tool, the moment I'm moving to new and creating a new project over here, this is taking me to the templates. I've got lots of installed templates over here. One of them is my Dynamics 365 category. If I click on my Dynamics 365 category down there, I'm seeing my unified operations. Right from here, I can start creating new project solutions and utilize them over there. That is something we would be discussing later on in the upcoming modules. And at the same point of time, if you see, I've got this Dynamics 365 menu on the top where I can have my models creations. I can create a new model. I can refresh the models, can see the dependencies down there. I can create a software deployable package, the SDP, which is really important to get it created from here, upload it to LCS, the Lifecycle Services, and deploy it to your various environments right from there. Or you can build your models, you can have the database synchronizations kick in right from here. So that was one example, Visual Studio being your primary tool for developing finance and operations extensions down there. At the same time, if I come back as SQL Server, since it is a one box development box over there, the dev box where all the components are there into a single machine, I'm connecting to this on-prem SQL Server, and you'll notice I've got my databases listed over here. So if I expand the databases, I've got my AXDB, the real-time OLTP database. I've got my AXDW for the data warehousing, where I can have cubes of facts and measures, pretty much for my historical analytical purposes. I've got my report server databases configured over here. I've got one for my management reporter to have my management reporter based reports down there. So we'll be discussing that over there. And if you talk about the portal access, I'm right in here, and that takes me to this Contoso sample data portal where I've got multiple entities available to me. I can pretty much do the drill down and see lots of entities which are available as part of that sample data. Also, I can click on that, which will take me to my module explorer. I mean, I can have my navigation menu. I can work out on various modules. Since I'm logged in as a system administrator, I do have access to pretty much everything over here. We'll come back onto that when we'll be having our navigational overview. In the meanwhile, if I take you back to my PowerPoint presentation, so this was the slide where we were discussing some of the Visual Studio development environment, the one which I've just demonstrated. If we talk about the next presentation slide down there, that talks about our on-premises versus cloud-based instances when we talk about the deployment strategies. So there are architectural and capability differences between the two installation types, and we will discuss that during the course as well. But as far as the quick differences are concerned, Let's understand them one by one. Uh, for example, one of our instance is deployed over the cloud. One of the customer chooses to go on premises. What are the major differences they would see as far as the availability, disaster recovery, functionality, anything related to any kind of difference down there? So the scalability is quite easy when you talk about your cloud hosted instances. So if your instances are hosted by Microsoft, or you have yourself hosted them on Azure cloud, you do have the privileges to upgrade them to different tiers where the compute and storage would be based on your own choice. You can easily upscale them, downscale them, without even considering of any kind of hardware considerations. It's a subscription based model down there. At the same point of time, when you talk about on-prem installations, your in-house system administrators and system IT teams are going to manage your fabric clusters. They'll be managing all that. They'd be considering the current and the future hardware capacity requirements. Accordingly, they'll be working out what possibly they should be deploying on those clusters. At the same point of time, the cost is going to be comparatively lower for small to mid-scale organizations, especially if you talk about large-scale organization, could be a different picture altogether. But when you talk about networking requirements, storage requirements, compute requirements, that has to be differentiated because they would differ in case of an on-prem installation. You have to plan them accordingly. At the same point of time, the implementation time is quite shorter when you're opting it for a cloud hosted infrastructure. And for on-prem, you can always do that, but there are some additional requirements. For example, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Rules Regulations, which are outside of European Union and inside Europe, you need to consider that. And that makes cloud one of the good options when you talk about compliance, when you talk about security, monitoring at the same time, scalability at the same time. Uh, when it comes to the patch updates, you can pretty much do it on the fly, planning it right from there. And on-prem, you have to plan your additional disaster recovery checklists down there. The DR site needs to be there. So these are few of the differences which talks about whether you should opt in for on-prem or the cloud-based installations. But to talk about them in detail, technically that goes with the choice what you want to offer. The solutions available in an on-prem mode as well versus a cloud hosted environment as well. You can host it in a third-party data center. It's all up to you. How do you want to plan that? At the same point of time, when we talk about development and deployment, you have get the latest on code to reduce conflicts. When we talk about developing and making your build, creating that as a software deployable package and uploading it to the LCS portal, you can perform your local build. As I was showing you on the Visual Studio, you can create your software deployable package down there. You can check out your code. You can have the source controls over there. You can have check in, check out, change state captures down there with the help of Azure DevOps, which will help you creating a build pipeline, working up on a release pipeline where the software deployable packages can be the part of those CI/CD pipelines down there. At the same point of time, you can apply this package directly into the lifecycle services using the apply updates tools if there are some updates available to your environment or the infrastructure. It is possible pretty much when I talk about can you create a deployable package right from Visual Studio? Well, you can always do that if you want to create your deployable package right from the Visual Studio itself. And especially when we talk about the type of environments, whether it is your tier 2 UAT or tier 1 UAT or a sandbox for our developer box or one box or production instance, it's really important you will choose what packages to be applied on which environment at what time. But for the production instance, you have to request those updates to be applied, and Microsoft will process your service request and do that accordingly. So that is something we will be covering in the LCS management, taking a look at the environments and working right from there. At the same point of time, when we talk about Dynamics 365, there are drastic changes in terms of user interface from the previous versions. For example, AX 2009 or AX 2012 R2 R3. The entire user interface, the UI, has been shifted into the web in form of HTML encoded pages down there. So we would be discussing some of the UI, user interface key features. So you've got your navigation search, you've got your action search, and I've got multiple things which will be in there. So let's take a look on them one by one. For this one, I'm taking you back to my virtual machine where I'm connected to the hands-on labs. Let me go in here. An important thing is the moment you open that, let me close it and show you that right from scratch. Let me close all these windows right across in here. So I'm into my virtual machine where I can start utilizing and using those options. I'm double clicking on Dynamics 365 home icon, which is taking me to this URL for my training and testing cloud sandbox. Let me just open that, and it by default takes me to Contoso Entertainment System USA because that's the company, the legal entity which is set it up on my user preferences. If I go down over here, the very first thing you're seeing on top is search for a page, also known as the global search functionality. Now, this is really good, guys. It's not completely new to Dynamics. It is definitely new in terms of AX or 2012 R3 or Dynamics 365. That functionality is new. It wasn't available in the previous releases. But similar kind of thing was available in Dynamics Nav, and the same concept Microsoft applied to Dynamics 365 over here. What it does, for example, if I'm talking about my payment terms, I'm looking something to my payment terms, whether it's related to the setup or anything else. So you will notice it is getting me all those options, and I'm able to see whether you want to do it on your accounts payables, you want to do it on your accounts receivables, you want to do it on inquiries and report segment. So the moment you click over here, it will directly take you to that particular menu item where you can start configuring and setting up those payment terms right across in there. At the same point of time, I can go them right from there as well. For example, I'm going to my accounts receivable, I'm moving to my setup area, I can see lots of things over here. I'm looking for my payment setup, and I've got my payment terms right across in here. So I can go essentially from the module, looking up individual options down there and moving it right from there. The great thing is it is giving me a great functionality where I can have the information search associated. We would be having a dedicated session of what kind of searches we can apply, whether it's for all or I want to do the search only for tables or forms or anything related to that. We'll be having a look later on. That is the very first option what we have in here. At the same point of time, let's take an example. If I'm moving to my accounts receivable, and underneath my accounts receivable, let me click on all customers. I'm going to the list of customers over here. That will open me the list of customers on the current legal entity, which is my USMF. Right, let this one gets loaded. It is a little bit slower, and that's quite obvious because it is just a training machine running under limited amount of compute and memory. So that's okay, that'll get loaded. And secondary reason is, for the very first time, whenever I'm opening any of those menu items, they're building the client cache as well. And next time onwards, that's gonna be a whole lot more faster. So you'll see that it took a couple of seconds to open these customers right across. So anywhere, whomsoever the customer we are talking about right across in here. Now, at the same point of time, you want to go for any of those options down there. You would like to perform any kind of actions associated to that. So let's say I'm opening up US 008, which is my Sparrow Retail sample customer associated right across in here. At the same point of time, I would like to perform some sort of actions associated to that. So you see, I've got the generals, I've got my options menu over here, I've got my marketing related things over there, I've got my project operations related things down there. So I have multiple things over here. At the same point of time, if I'm clicking on invoice over here, for example, I'm just typing invoicing, you'll see that the global search is giving me multiple options related to the invoicing functionality, which you can always have some of those things in here. Now, if I go back to my home tab or the default dashboard, I'm in here. And I told you, just like I told you, if you click on all customers again this time, let me just do that. And this time it'll be much more faster when it comes to opening up those records in there because the cache was built successfully. At the same point of time, any of your menu items, if you're accessing them much more frequently, I can always mark them as favorites and they'll be available right over here in the favorites bar, so you can pretty much use them. And no need to say that, you can always pin that navigation pane, toggle in, toggle out, you can always do that. That'll help you making your favorites and opening them as and when required. We'll be discussing a couple of more things. Let me take you back to my PowerPoint presentation here. So at the same point of time, you'll see I've got the workspaces as far as my Dynamics 365 is concerned. So let me show you what these options are. If I take you back to my virtual machine, and let me go at the home tab, very first thing, I'm seeing my default dashboard, or you can see a default workspace, which I'm seeing right across in here. At the same point of time, I've got my workspaces listed over here. Well, there are multiple ways how can we access them as an end user. One of them could be, if I'm moving to my accounts payable, I've got two different workspaces over here. Being a developer or a technical consultant during this program, you will also learn how to customize these workspaces and even how to create new workspaces if required. So let me click on my vendor payments workspace. And as I click over here, that will take me to that particular workspace, which is a collection of some tiles associated over here, some of the quick view forms associated, view of payments not settled, finding some sort of transactions, the invoices which are past due. At the same time, I have some related information over here as well. I can see some analytics related details if Power BI is enabled right across. But if I would like to access the same thing, I can do it from here as well. So these are consolidated view of all the workspaces which are available in the system. Right now I can see all of them because I'm logged in as a system administrator. For example, if you are an accounting clerk, or you're an AR coordinator, or you're an CFO, you will see these workspaces which are aligned to your security roles. So let's take an example. If I'm talking about my cash overview for the current company, that's the workspace I would like to get it loaded over here, which will give me the details related to the bank accounts, their associated values. And of course, you can see that it requires Power BI and that's not enabled. Hence, I'm seeing this particular loading error. We'll discuss how from where we can enable Power BI as well. At the same point of time, if you see, I've got multiple options down there. I've got lots of workspaces which I can start working around. Being a system admin or a technical consultant, sometimes you might want to do some sort of data migrations down there. So if I'm on my system administration, for example, you'll see I've got my data management workspace. The moment I click over here, that's the place where I can start performing my DIXF operations, data import export framework operations down there. That's fine. The entity is being refreshed. That's okay. The important thing is I've got all these tiles. I can have my import exports projects right over there, the jobs execution history. So these workspaces were just like your role center pages in 2012, completely redesigned in form of HTML tiles and all. And that's how we are seeing them over here. If I take you back to my PowerPoint presentation, the next segment talks about the user personalization. Well, what it is actually. So if I go back in there to my virtual machine, sometimes being an end user, there are some fields which are not important to me. There are some fields which are not available, but I would like them to be there. So it's really impossible to develop kind of a personalized form for everyone. So that's where the personalization kicks in. You can start customizing the user interface only for yourself, and if required, we can share those with other users, or we can apply those organization wide. So having said that, how does that work? Let's take an example. If I go to my accounts payable, I'm clicking on my vendors area, and being an end user, just a small example, I'm good with my grid view, which will be loaded in here. One of a kind of customization I want to do, let's say on the main form. So for example, if I'm opening up any of my vendor right across, let's say I'm looking for add a supply company. Let me open that 1003. I'm opening my main vendors form. So pretty much my vendor master. Like get open over here, and I can see various fast tabs available, the addresses, contact information, plenty of details in here. Well, there are some things which I really don't want to do or apply in here. And based on our organization, for example, all I'm doing is right clicking over here, and there is an option called personalize, upper group, view shortcuts, form information. There are multiple things. At the same time, if you click on options right over here, there is always this one called personalize this form. The moment I click over here, it will open the user personalizations menu in front of me. So for example, what I want to do, let's say I've got this particular number of employees field in front of me. I don't want it. So let me just hide it. At the same point of time, when I talk about hiding any specific field, I can always do that. I would like to hide the number of employees at any given point of time. I would like to hide this. And at the same point of time, if I would like to add some fields from here, I can always do that. You want to move some fields, reorder them, you can always do that. So let's take an example. If I'm clicking on add a field, important thing is where you'd like to get these added. So let's say if I'm clicking on my general area right across in there, so that's where the list of new fields will be available, and we can pretty much select which fields we would like to be the part over there. So I would like to see the check for W9 has been completed or not. I also would like to see the credit limit and the credit rating. Although these fields are related to payment, so should be on the payment tab, but just for demonstration, I'm showing you these couple of options down there. And let me click on insert. So the moment I'm doing it, technically I'm changing this user interface with these new fields coming up right across in here. Am I doing it for everyone? Not really. I'm doing it only for myself. And can I apply these to multiple users? Of course. At any given point of time, you click on personalize this form and you can export those customizations, and then you can other users can import it, or being a system admin, you can apply for all the users if you want. But that's just one small example in terms of user interface navigation, that how the form personalization actually works over there. At the same point of time, I've got something related to my task recorder, and this is an excellent feature which is helping us doing plenty of things as part of that. So how does that work? How do we start utilizing it, and how it is beneficial to the end users for creating recording guides and all? Let's take an example. So I'm taking you back to my virtual machine over here, guys. Let me close this form. That's fine. An important thing, for example, you did something and you think I messed up kind of things over there. At any given point of time, you can clear your customizations from the form, and then all these things will be back. All you need to do is just click on refresh and reload this particular page. And once you clear those user personalizations, pretty much the form will come back as to the default state. So let's quickly see that I'm having this form. Let me open any of that vendor master record, and they'll open in front of me right across in there. And all these fields are coming back because I just cleared those user personalizations. Now let's take a look after the implementation. Training the key user is pretty much a tedious task, and a lot of end users are confused. Where should we click? Are we used to suppose, or are we supposed to use this option or not? Or what business processes we should follow? What information should really be filling up as mandatory or recommended information? So for that, Task Recorder can be your personal best friend, especially when you do a big scale, large scale organizations, and then you implement that or different geographical regions. So having said that, how do we do this one? So let's take an example. For example, I would like to learn that how do we create a vendor master, or how do we create a purchase order or a purchase requisition or a vendor invoice entry, anything related to that. All I'm going to start doing that is I'm clicking on this settings icon right over here, and I can see my task recorder. Let me click on that task recorder option. I've got multiple options over here. Create a recording, playing a recording as a guide for a recording which was already created, editing an existing recording, and playback recording. We'll be discussing all these options. Let me create a recording right from here. The moment I do that, it is asking me to supply the recording name. Well, let me go ahead and specify the details listed in here. I want to call it create vendor. And you would like to name it or something, it's all up to you. So you can have a description. Let's call it a user guide for vendor master. I'm clicking on start, and my task recorder will begin right from here. So what you're seeing right now, let's take a look. On the top, there is something which says create vendor and a red recording icon, meaning that's currently being recorded. I can stop it if I want. I can reinitiate that. If you want to hide this panel, it's all up to you. You click over there, the panel will be hidden over there, and you want to get it back at any given point of time, you can always do that. Let me expand that particular option. Important thing is how we would be utilizing that. So here in the steps area, I do not have anything so far. So let's see what I'm doing. The very first thing, I'm going to the module selection. I'm clicking on accounts payable, and then I'm clicking on all vendors area. Well, the moment I'm done, I've completed with the very first step. And as a result, you're seeing that the path is listed over here. Go to accounts payable, click on vendors, click on all vendors. Once I'm done with that, I would like to create a new vendor, for example. So let me click new over here. So the moment I do that, my task recorder is actually recording all these steps over here. So let me just do that. When I say new, you can see the values kicks in. The vendor account number, let me call it VN8765, whatever I specify in there. Then I'm moving to the name area, and then I'm specifying the name of this particular vendor. Let's call it, for example, GTL Inc., whatever I want to call it. What's going to be the search name? It's automatically coming up. And you see, it's giving you a tip as well. When you're using the lookups, you should be utilizing them from there. All right, so as you were seeing those tooltips, so I'm on the vendor group over here. Let me do the pull or drop down and select any values from here. Well, the moment I'm pretty much doing all these values associated, you will see that it's giving you that in the group field, enter or select a value or do anything over there. Important thing when you do all these informations down there, let me scroll it down, and let's say I'm adding one contact information. The moment I'm doing it into my contact information, it will be adding a new row where I can pretty much do that. So let's say I'm talking about business email, for example, and this is also a drop down. I'm clicking on the drop down over here. In the list of drop down, I'm selecting email address. So whatever you're doing over here, your task recorder is pretty much going to capture all that information. Let me say over here, whatever you specify and have those informations across. At the same point of time, if let's say if I'm coming down over here, I'm on my payment tab, and I would like to specify the payment details, the payment terms and everything. So when I'm actually doing that drop down across in there, let's say I'm specifying the payment terms over there is going to be net 15 days or net 45 days or net 60 days, whatever we specify. What's going to be the default method of payment? Let me specify that check over here. Well, I'm not explaining you how do we create a vendor. The purpose of this demonstration is to understand how the task recorder actually works over here. So let's say I'm just clicking on save on the top. I've just created this vendor and I'm done creating a vendor master over here. So at this point of time, what I'm doing is I'm clicking on stop this task recorder. So the moment I do that, you will see that your recording is ready and I can do plenty of things with this particular recording. One, I can save it to my PC, and when I do so, it will pretty much download that and I'll be able to have this recording opened however I would like to use it. So let me just click on save on this PC. It's processing the request and you'll see that it is having a create vendor.axtr. Any extension with axtr is my D365 task recorder. Let me save it. The next in the segment is I can save it to my lifecycle services where I can have it as my BPM artifacts down there and it will be helpful for the users. That is something we generally discuss in MB500, which is a more appropriate course for lifecycle services. Let me go down, export that as a Word document. As the name suggests, that will create a Word document of this particular recording. I can save it as a developer recording as well in form of XML, where I can start utilizing that later on and start customizing that. So if I show you all these options, let me close them from here. I'm clicking on returning to main menu, and the very first thing, I downloaded a couple of file formats. Save it to this PC in form of axtr, AX task recorder files. I can import it to other environments if required. There is a XML for the developers. There is a Word document for the end users. If you open that, let me double click over here. I'm opening up this in Microsoft Word over there. What important thing you will notice, all those steps which were part of that particular task recording, now you see they are available right across in here and pretty much the users can start following that. Great, isn't it? Correct. So let's close that up and let's go to the next stuff over there. So currently I created a vendor creation, and let's say someone have imported that or other users would like to utilize that task recording. How do I do that? Let me click on play recording as a guide. When I do so, it is saying where is your recording? Is it at your LCS portal or from a recent ones or open from this PC? Well, let me have open from the recent ones. And when you click over here, the task recordings which are available in the system, you're pretty much seeing all of them together. The one which I'm interested is where it says create vendor. So you see that it's giving me create vendor today's date, the when I pretty much utilize that. Let me select this one and I'm clicking on open task guide. Let me just do that. And now you see that I've got all those 15 steps over here, which every user should be following in order to create a vendor with all those fields specified. Well, let me click on start this task guide. And when I do so, you will notice it's a play icon for create vendor. And now you're currently at the very first step when it says go to all vendors. So it is telling you go to all vendors. The moment you do that, let me go over here. For example, I'm clicking right across in there and clicking on all the vendors. So technically my first step is completed. And the moment it analyzes the first step is completed, it automatically takes this toggle over here which says click on this new icon. Well, let me click on this new icon. My second step is also completed. So I'm running this as an end user. So I want to create a new vendor. The new form appears. Let's type in any value, whatever you want. So let's call vendor number 8764 whatsoever I would like to use it. And then the next segment is you need to specify the next step down there. So if you want to skip any of that step, you want to lock or unlock any features down there, that's completely up to you. So let's say I'm saying quick to hire Inc, whatever value I'm specifying in there. The next step is talking me to select a vendor group. And the moment I do that, so you can see that how I'm actually utilizing all those values in here and how my task recorder is currently being playing over here. So that's one small example. What is task recorder as a functionality down there? How can you record it? How can you play an existing recording? How can you export it to multiple formats down there? Let me just have any of those values associations down there. I'm saying the services vendors, let me save it. Well, that was one small example that how task recorder as a feature is available and currently works down there. Let me take you to my PowerPoint presentation once again. The next in the segment talks about office integrations. So you see that tiny office icons which gives you the best possibility export to Excel, a dynamic export and various things down there. So let me show you how does that work. If I'm at my virtual machine over here, and let's say I'm at my all vendors page, so I'm clicking on all vendors down here. On the grid, I'll see the office integration icon. The moment I click over here on open in Microsoft Office, I'm seeing multiple options. There is open in Excel and then there is export to Excel. Well, in both the ways, I'm going to see those records in Excel, but there is a difference between them. Well, what that is, let's take an example. If I click on export to Excel, this is a static export. Whatever is in the page on the grid, I can pretty much click on download or save it to SharePoint or OneDrive, wherever you want to. Let me quickly click on downloads over here. I'll get the data into my Excel file. Let me save as wherever I want to. So this time I want to do it on my desktop. Let me save that. And let me open that in Excel. The moment I'm doing it, technically, it is saying that I've got this options available. Let me click on enable editing. You can do any of your changes, all those important things over here. But what's important to understand, this is a static export. What does it mean? If I'm making any changes to Dynamics 365 Vendor Master, or if I'm making any changes to this Excel sheet, they're not synchronizing. Well, wouldn't it be really great if we can have a two-way synchronization using Excel add-in or something like that? Well, that's where the Open in Excel comes in. So when you click on that Office icon, there is called Open in Excel. One is obsolete over here. Let me go for Vendors V2. I'm clicking and this will also download me a file. Let me just do that. But that's going to be our dynamic export. What does it mean? Let's take a look. So this is my V2 entity. Let me save it on my desktop and let me open that in Excel. All right, let's take a look, guys. I'm clicking on enable editing over here. On the top, you will see that it is telling you there is a new Office add-in. Do you trust it? This is asking me only for the very first time. I'm clicking on trust this add-in, and now you will see Dynamics 365 add-in for Excel. All I need to click on sign in. I'm doing it for the very first time, and then it'll capture all those informations automatically. And once I'm doing it, it is connecting me with the current logged in user to the portal. And now you will see that it is refreshing all the data. And once that's done, I'll see all the data listing up right over here. So let's take a look. I'm seeing all that information coming across in here. What is important to understand, I've got various vendors associated. There is one which says Acme Office Supplies 1001. Let's say what I'm doing over here. I'm moving to my portal. Let's go for 1001 Acme Office Supplies, and I'm trying to make some changes over here. And this is something I'm doing on my D365. So let me edit this record. And right across in here, I want to call it updated. Well, just for demonstration purposes, I made some changes to the name group. It was pretty much on vendor group 40. I'm just shifting it to vendor group 20, which is on the services vendors. Let me just do that. Let me click OK and just saving that. So I made some sort of updates to my record, which is in question currently. Let me go back to my Excel spreadsheet, which is a dynamic export. Let me refresh right from here, from the add-in. The moment I'm doing it, now you see that all the information, whatever you changed, is currently, it says updated for this record. The group is currently changed to number 20 down the line over here. And let's say for best supplier Europe, the current group was number 10. I want to make it to group number 40 down there. And then there is a LTL vendor, and I want to do it LTL vendor Inc. I want to make some changes associated over here. So you see that I've made some changes on the Excel spreadsheet now. What I want to do is I would like to publish those changes, whether I'm adding a new record, whether I'm updating an existing record down there. Well, deletion's quite not possible from the Excel add-in for this particular vendor master as of now. Well, let's take a look. You see it's telling you the publish successful, the workflow update, the workbook updated. If I go to my data cache sheet over here, that's telling me that this is pretty much my vendor sheet, and I'm seeing some information available fetching up from my OData entities, but that's okay. That's just one thing what I was having it over here. What I would like to see is when I click on the message center, you see that all those operations, whatever I was performing, I'm pretty much seeing them right across in here. And at the same point of time, if I go back to the portal and let me go to my vendors list, so I'm clicking on all vendors over here, and whatever changes we did from the Excel spreadsheet will be available right across in here. So I was having all these options. I got this change to 40. That was the best supplier Europe down there. And I've got the LTL vendor Inc., the second change, which is also applied. So now you understand the integration with Office. What is the difference between a dynamic export and a static export? So that's one thing they were talking about in this presentation, that I've got my Office integrations available right across in there. Then I've got some reporting capabilities available. So when I talk about the reporting capabilities, D365 have plenty of options. You can have your Power BI, you can have your SSRS reports, you can have your reports based out on Management Reporter, you can have it on Excel spreadsheets and all. So let's take an example. If I take you to my virtual machine, and this time I'm in here into my vendor options, and I'm clicking on my reports. So let me click on inquiries and reports right across in there. And I would like to see my vendor transactions report. When I click over here, I'm trying to run an existing SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services report over here, which will give me some data based on the specified parameters. And once again, I'm doing it for the very first time, so it will take a little bit having the SSRS cache build and everything. Next time onwards, it'll be real quick right across in there. So in the meanwhile it is loading, let me open another tab over here, and let's go to the same portal one more time. It's opening up. Let me go to my first one, ensuring it's currently opening up those details associated over there. Let's take a look. That's fine. Let me go from here. I was looking to my accounts payable, and I was looking to my vendor transactions report. And now I have this wizard open where I can set up all the parameters. I can change the destination over the screen, or send it to a printer, or export it to a file. What kind of records you want to include, you want to apply some filters. Let me click OK, and that will fetch this SSRS report, provided if my SSRS is configured correctly and the reporting services is up and running from the SQL Server perspective. So it's running up over here. In the meanwhile, if I'm over here, well, that was the older screen. Let me show you the different approach one more time. I'm moving to my system administration. And inside my system administration, I've got multiple things to set up. So if you go to the setup area, I've got my Power BI configurations. So when you click over here, you can enable the embedded Power BI service by creating a new app registration on your Azure portal and configuring that API app and key secrets over here. Like get open once. In the meanwhile, if you see, my vendor transactions report is currently loading, and this is how my SSRS is currently being provisioning. That's fine. It's opening up. So let me go again. Yep, there we are. When you want to enable a Power BI integration, you need to specify the application ID and the application key right across over here, and that could be generated from the Azure portal with an app registration. And all you need to do thereafter is deploy these Power BI files, and you can start utilizing these analytics features in D365. So these are two different options, whether it's your SSRS report or Power BI deployment, which is being currently visible in this PowerPoint presentation over here. You can have your reports based out of Management Reporter as well. You can have them from exporting them to Excel, whether it's a static export or a dynamic export. So multiple reporting capabilities which are available in here. So this was the very first lesson, guys, which was talking about the key components and pretty much what major tools and a navigational overview we have with the application. Of course, you can follow these links which are available as additional resources for your additional further learnings related to Dynamics 365. All these references are available 24/7 hosted at docs.microsoft.com. So this was the very first lesson what we had from us, guys. I should see you into the next module, the lesson number 2, exploring the technical architecture. So thank you very much for being with me in this particular video. I'll see you into the next lesson. Enjoy your D365 learning. Bye-bye.